Okay, so do you folks want me, when I introduce you, to use your last names or no?
I don't care. Whatever you do.
Yeah, I guess whatever you normally do.
Yeah.
Well, I guess normally people are more famous than me. Yeah, whatever.
Not after this.
Yeah. Could you garble my voice?
When I travel,
It's totally benign. Oh my God.
I choked on my wine.
Welcome to Deep Dive with me, Shawn Fettig. I'm a political scientist, and I'm interested in how our government and our politicians influence our lives, but also how our personal stories influence our politics. In this podcast, I may focus on topics in the news, but this is not punditry. Instead, I dive deep into issues and stories with my guests, behind the headlines, beyond the basic narrative that is often crafted by the media and our politicians, to help us better understand each other and why we think and feel the ways we do. All right, folks, so this is the season 1 finale of Deep Dive. This season has been filled with mostly pretty serious stuff: right-wing extremism, white supremacy, nationalism, the seeming war between red and blue America, actual war in Ukraine, the rolling back of fundamental rights in the United States, and what this all means for the future of American democracy. In this episode, though, I'm shifting the focus a bit. I'm talking to 3 friends of mine that I've known for the better part of my life, people that all share a common obsession of mine: travel. We've all structured our lives to ensure that we get probably more than typical travel in our lives, especially as Americans who are conditioned to believe that we, quote, earn 2 weeks of vacation a year, that anything more is a luxury, and that travel should be done in pursuit of relaxation from our otherwise packed, hectic, exhausting work lives. I, along with these friends, Shannon Ahrndt, Heidi Stiemsma, and Dovi, have taken a different approach, that travel is fundamental to understanding our own place in this world, to enhancing our own joy, to broadening our perspectives, and shaping our worldviews. And so all of the decisions that we make about our finances, our housing, our jobs, and where we live account, at least in some part, for this love of travel and maintaining that ability to do so. I want to acknowledge up front that this conversation is through the lens of an American lifestyle. We are 4 Americans, and all white Americans, talking about our experiences. And we are all well aware that the very ability to travel is a developed world option that is not equally shared across most of the world. Also, just for relationship background, Shannon and Heidi are cousins. Tony is Heidi's husband, and I am the hanger-on. Okay, let's do a deep dive. Shannon Ahrndt, hi, how are you?
Hi. Doing good. Doing well.
Heidi Stiemsma, hi, how are you?
Hi, Shawn.
That's the only tone you ever use with me. And the least well-known of us, Dovi.
Great to be here with you, Shawn.
So you're all old friends, and I actually mean that in that we've known each other for quite a while, and that you're old.
I knew that was coming.
It was a twofer, yeah. But so thanks for being here. I want to pick your brains, because we've all known each other. I mean, Shannon, I've known you the longest, so probably almost, if not 20 years, almost 20 years, right?
Yeah, I think it is right around 20. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we just celebrated our 28th, so we've known each other almost our entire lives.
That's right.
And then Heidi and Tony, not much shorter, maybe 15-ish years, right?
Yeah, I think I met you on a boat. From what I
Oh, yeah. I think it was for my birthday.
Yeah. In Milwaukee, which is where we all came from.
Yes.
But I don't think were any of us even living there at the time. It was kind of random.
Yeah.
I might have been still.
Oh, maybe we were too.
Yeah, I think you were, Shawn.
And so actually, that's a good place to start. Shannon, you were back from Korea, right? Just visiting.
Yeah, I was visiting. So when I lived in Korea, I would come back to the States every summer for about a month or 2, depending on what was going on. And yeah, I was back in the States for a couple of months and had a birthday gathering. And I think that's where you all met.
Let's use Korea as a starting point. I think it's kind of through that in an ancillary way, we all met each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Shannon, When did you move to Korea? Had you had a lot of extensive experience traveling prior to that?
Definitely my first experience traveling overseas, other than like Canada with our families.
Which is also not overseas, just everyone.
Oh, good point. Overland.
Overland.
Overland. Oh, okay. I guess international is the word that I'm looking for. Look, I'm jet lagged, so everything that I say that doesn't make sense, I'm going to blame that. Heidi and my family, actually, since Heidi and I are cousins, and our family traveled to Canada together, but I believe we were in college then. Is that right, Heidi?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that was my first international trip. And then Heidi and I went to Ireland together, and it was, I think, in 2000 when I graduated from college, and we just decided to go. And that sort of ignited my travel bug. And I went to graduate school, and after I graduated, I was looking for jobs in the States, but I realized that I really was kind of pulled to travel more, and I didn't know how I could do that with a regular job where you get typically 2 to 3 weeks vacation a year. It just wasn't enough. So Heidi and I went to Ireland for a week, and that was just not enough, right? So each time that I traveled, it would be like once a year, maybe for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then I thought, this just isn't quenching my thirst enough. So when I finished graduate school, I actually was going through a breakup, and that also helped kind of push me out of my comfort zone. And that's when I started looking for jobs that I could do overseas. And I found a job in South Korea, in Seoul, teaching, and I was qualified for it. So I decided to do that. So yeah, I moved over there in 2005 when I graduated.
And then lived there. I always say you lived there for 10 years. Is that true?
I lived there, until 2015. And then I moved to Vietnam for 2 years. So I was living overseas for 12 years in total in Asia.
So all of us have traveled quite a bit. And actually my first big travel experience, again, yeah, I had traveled to Canada, but like overseas was to visit you, Shannon.
That's cool.
In Korea, which was, I mean, that kind of opened the world to me. But we all of us, all four of us, have taken, I think, an un-American approach to travel in that. And you touched on this, Shannon, which is, most Americans, we get like maybe 2 weeks of vacation a year. And we think in terms of 1 week at a time going somewhere.
Right.
And that's not typical of a lot of other countries. I don't want to say most, but especially in like Europe. But at any rate, we all, the four of us, have found ways to kind of build into our American lives, because we all live in America now, the ability to travel pretty extensively and for extended periods of time. So Shannon, you teach at university, which gives you the ability to, travel, especially over the summers. And, I had also taught at university, and there were periods of time that I was doing work remotely, so I could work, overseas. So I would spend, 3 or 4 months at a time in other places. And then Heidi and Tony, how did you land in the space that you're in? So you are self-employed.
Self-employed now, yes. The very first traveling that I would say I really did was because of Heidi. When we got together, we were working at the same advertising agency, and like you already touched on, we only had 2 weeks. I think by that point we had 3 weeks of vacation, and we took a trip together to go see Shannon in Korea and parlayed that into a trip to Japan as well. So that was my first exposure to real travel overseas, Asia. And as we were doing that, we had a freelance side business going, and then eventually realized we didn't want just 2 or 3 weeks of vacation anymore. So we said, let's just figure out a way to quit our jobs, start our own business, and then we can do this whenever we want, for as long as we want, as long as we have an internet connection. So that's what we did. And that was approximately...
we set the savings goal.
Yeah, we set a
did a bunch of research if you want to travel. And we knew we wanted to travel for about a year.
Yeah.
And so we did a bunch of research, set the financial goal. And then it was we just were working toward that goal. And then we knew we were free and
cut way back on everything else and said, okay, let's hit that goal as fast as possible so that we can do this. And
sold most of our stuff.
Yeah. Sold everything and just said, this is the date. We're going to be able to do it. We quit and traveled for 1 year, starting in, I think that was 2012 or 12, somewhere around there.
I don't know if you run into this. So we've all structured our lives around travel as like a key component of our life.
That's
right.
So
when I tell people about travel, and specifically my travel, I sometimes get a version of something like, that I'm very lucky, or that I must not have a lot of responsibility in my life.
Yes.
To be able to travel as much as I do. And I concede that some privilege plays into this. I'm a white man, Pasha's a white man, and that definitely affords us an access and safety that, other non-white, non-male people may not enjoy. But we've also made travel very important in our lives. We put a high premium on it. We value it. And so, we've adjusted our lives to reflect that. We live very frugally, as you know. We've consciously chosen not to have children. And I mean, none of us have kids.
Yep.
Because in part, the cost of children is prohibitive if you want to travel extensively or retire early or do anything with some modicum of autonomy. And it's not going to accidentally happen with us. One of us is not going to get pregnant. So to say that we can travel the ways that we do is, solely due to luck or because we have no responsibility is just not accurate. And I wonder if any of you experience this.
Running your own business, Heidi and I have plenty of stress. I mean, we have to make sure we keep doing what we're doing and doing it well enough to keep our clients. When COVID came through, our business dropped by probably 75%. Luckily, we were, I don't want to say stranded because we were just perfectly fine in the Philippines at the time. But those kind of things happen, unforeseen things. Clients just decide to bring everything in-house or whatever. So there's plenty of stress that's involved with our lives. It doesn't involve a family and kids, which I'm not saying isn't stressful. That's very stressful, I'm sure. But there's plenty of stress that we deal with in our lives. So it's not just an easy out for, oh, yeah, we can just go travel and, live stress-free.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you brought that up, Shawn, because I just returned back a couple of days ago from a 6-week trip to Portugal. And that was one thing that I grappled with was when I was leaving or, I mentioned that I was going for 6 weeks. It's definitely not the norm here in the States. And people were shocked. They were also jealous. So I had a friend who, she's like, I'm just trying to manage my jealousy around this. You're so lucky. And then is it luck or is it good planning? Research, it does come with a healthy dose of privilege for sure. I realize that, but they are choices that we were deliberate about. And I started thinking about that, when I was in my 20s, because that's when I left for Korea. And I thought, okay, if I do this, I'm giving up so many other things. So I had a friend when I decided to move to Korea, he just kind of pulled me aside and said, what are you doing? That's not, you're ruining your chances for getting a job when you come back. That's not kind of in the script. Essentially, you're supposed to graduate from school, find a partner, settle down, buy a house, have kids. And it kind of blew his mind that I was taking this other path that is not as common, or certainly wasn't as common in 2005. And so it is really something, it's kind of hard to deal with in certain ways because not a lot of people understand it.
So why do you travel? And I guess the reason I'm asking this is because, so Shannon, when I went to visit you in Korea, do you remember when you were visiting Milwaukee at the time, which is where I lived, and we planned this literally over like brunch or something, right? Like I think I booked it while we were there. And
yeah. Oh, I remember in your backyard at the time, right?
I had never traveled. The flights I'd taken in my life were, I could count on one hand, and they were all under like 3 hours. And
yeah,
I had just gotten my first passport, and it was like, it was aspirational. I was like, it just felt free to have a passport. So at any rate, you had said, well, you could come visit me. And I was like, I could come visit you. And at the time I had a new job that I was starting in like October or something. And so I had plenty of time, and I was like, so what should I do? Come for like a week? Because that was so ingrained in my head.
That's how long it had to, or how short it had to be.
And you had said like, well, I mean, you could come for, longer. And I was like, well, what, like 2 weeks? And then on a whim, I was like, well, what about like 3 weeks? And then just booked it.
Without waiting for my response.
Yeah, because you're like, oh God, no. But why I'm, even mentioning this is that there are different types of travel, right? Like to go for a vacation. And I think we've kind of established that in the United States, we really have this 1 week kind of mindset. Or it's a lifestyle, you incorporate that into just your being and who you are. Or, you have this, you're a nomad. So like maybe it's an environmental nomad or a digital nomad, or it's just about sightseeing, or it's more about embedding yourself into a place. And for me, that trip, I guess, moved me out of the space of thinking of travel as being this 1 week thing that you kind of just relax, which is absolutely okay. But that it could be something way more. And I really leaned into after that, this idea that for me, what's important is to go places and settle in and feel like I'm kind of almost weaving myself into the fabric of that place, like living there. And I feel like all of you in your own way have done that.
Yeah.
I think that's an essential reason that we that we have the ability to travel for longer periods of time, is because going somewhere for a week, in my opinion, doesn't really let you sink your feet into the earth in that place. It just, you're there, you're kind of a visitor. Whereas if you can go somewhere for a month or 2 or 3, even, you get to become a part almost of a small community, unless you're bouncing from place to place to place to place.
But as an American, when you have 10 days, like you said, Shawn, like you can't fault anybody for just wanting to relax.
Yeah.
And that's all they get for the entire year. Like I was the same way. It was like, get me to an all-inclusive.
Yeah.
I want to be on the beach.
Warm weather was definitely a draw, especially living in Wisconsin, where you wanted to just get away in the wintertime and go somewhere warm for a while.
Right. And I think there's a difference between a vacation and traveling.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I think what we're talking about, it's more about travel and not about vacationing necessarily. So for me, I think of a vacation as relaxing, like what Heidi just said, just laying on a beach, all inclusive. I'm not doing a lot. It doesn't matter to me if I get to know the culture, because it's all about restoring myself versus traveling, which is not necessarily relaxing. And that's not the goal of traveling, or at least for me. It is more about digging into the culture and learning. For me, what I love about it is it actually holds a mirror up to our own culture, and you get a chance to see how other people and cultures do things and live differently. And it makes you question your own values of the decisions you've made in your life are all really set up for you. Like our culture structures our lives in a way, and you can remove yourself from that and see that it's actually not that way elsewhere. And then you can make a more conscious decision of how you really want to live.
Yeah.
This is a good point you make, Shannon, because I think that has made life, like it's liberated me. And at the same time, I feel like it's made life more challenging for me. When I travel and I see other ways of doing things, it is liberating in that when I'm there, I'm like, this is, assuming that it actually aligns with something I would like in my life, because I've certainly been places where it doesn't, where I'm like, get me the fuck out of here. But it's liberating in that I feel less heavy than I would maybe in the States, where some things might seem maybe a bit more restrictive or different in ways that I don't like. But it's also challenging in that I then want that for my life. Like, I don't want to come back and like fall back into the same pattern.
Yeah. Right. Like the long dinners that you might have in Europe, right? You go out for dinner in France and it's like a 4-hour affair, right? And nobody's pushing you out the door, trying to turn the table over. It's more of an experience, right? That's what you're doing that evening, is you're enjoying the food, you're enjoying the company. Whereas here, it's more of like, all right, move it along. We've got another table reservation at 7, And so I think that's a good example of like, okay, I like how they do it there, but can I bring that back here? I can't go out to a restaurant like that here. So I guess I might have to create like a dinner party at my house where we do that,
So I guess this just begs the question, like if we all agree that we are primarily travelers, not necessarily vacationers, so what are you looking for in travel then?
I think like Shannon kind of touched on it, like really immersing myself in a place and feeling like I live there. Like when we did our year of travels, I think at first we were trying to pack too much in too quickly. And we very quickly realized, like you said, it is not a vacation. Like real travel is exhausting at times. And so we started planting ourselves in places for longer amounts of time where you feel like part of the neighborhood and you kind of get a taste of what's going on and the vibe where you are. And you can kind of just walk around and explore. Like that is my favorite part, where you just actually feel like slice of life. This is what it would be like to live here. And like Shannon mentioned too, like observing how their culture is different from ours and what can you gain from it. Of course, there's always things you're like, oh, I don't really care for that, but I really, really like X, Y, and Z. Like the food here is amazing. Or like in the Philippines, how it's such a community there. We really felt like part of a community there. And that was something I don't know that we had really felt in the US before.
Yeah.
And I think we're finally establishing that now. But that feeling of like you're part of the place that you're living in, I really like that.
Yeah, you see some of the same people, as in if you were living here in the US and you say hi to your neighbors every day, if you have the time to spend in one place for a long time, like we did in the Philippines, you would get to see the same people and you'd have conversations, you'd ask them about their day, and you just started to feel like this is where you live now. It's not, well, I'm, just visiting here. It's basically where you're living for, X amount of time.
And that's the best way, I think, to travel, is to get to know other people's stories from, in different countries. Like, I love going on walking tours, or Shawn, you and I went on the street taco tour in Mexico. And I felt like that was one of my favorite memories, because you actually get to talk with the guide about not just tacos, but about life there and digging deeper. And I did that when I was in Portugal, and I really appreciate that. Those are the most memorable times for me. Or if you're settling into a place and you get to kind of get to know your neighbor who has lived there their whole lives. I feel like that's so valuable.
One thing I wanted to add too, that was something I didn't expect when I started doing the traveling with Heidi, when we were talking about that year that we did that. I was kind of traveling in the beginning for curiosity. I didn't know anything about these places. We kind of were just going from place to place. But being a creative person for, being in the art field, I didn't.
Oh God, here's a plug.
I didn't.
I'll put it in the show notes, Tony.
DoviDesign.com, punk rock design.
I didn't expect you are bad. I didn't expect to be so inspired by each and every place that we went, in a different way, from the art scene to the architecture to the people to the packaging of the beers you were drinking or the places you were going. It was all very just different than what I've seen in the past. So from a creative standpoint, that was a new reason to go and travel. Was something that I didn't really expect, but that is a new reason that I want to go to places, is to just be inspired culturally in a creative way.
That's a great point.
It is a great point.
I think there's also a freedom that you feel as a traveler that allows you to kind of discover some new things about yourself when you're free from your culture and family of origin and you're somewhere else, and you don't have to really fit in with the local culture. You don't really fit in there. You stand out, but you kind of meet other travelers, and then you realize, like, as travelers, you sort of have your own culture. And we found that those are the people in our lives that we've been able to connect with and relate to the most, is people that travel. And I do think a lot about how the US would be different if we had more vacation time like Europeans do, or a lot of other cultures, and people could get out of their bubbles more. I think a lot of the problems in our country wouldn't exist as much, because like you find it in travel, you meet people from all different backgrounds, all different ages. I mean, we met couples like in their 70s that were traveling for the first time.
So Shawn's age. Got it. Yeah.
And then you find like you have this common ground.
I don't meet people of all ages. They're just all younger than me.
Yeah, for you, they're all young.
And I know that none of us have kids, and we're talking about this from a completely childless viewpoint. But
I'm not missing that.
yeah, I'm not missing. Right. But I mean, we did meet people who were traveling with, very young kids, 4 or 5 years old or something.
Yeah.
And they were doing it. They just said, yeah, we're traveling for 6 months, and they were going all over Asia. And so
and how cool for their kids to
Yeah.
learn these
My
things
gosh.
at such a young age.
Heidi, I want to circle back because I think you touched on something that I 100% experienced in my travel, and is absolutely true for me, is there is a sense of like a liberty to some degree to be in a place where I don't completely fit in there.
Yeah.
And I don't have the internal pressure that I have to fit in there. I kind of like the sense that I don't. It gives me a lot of latitude to just be myself.
Yes.
And I'm far enough away from, or I'm away from whatever constructs exist in my life that are kind of framing how I live, that I don't feel that pressure. And I remember that whole experience being around people, but also very isolated. I didn't know anyone. I wasn't embedded in the culture, and I didn't have to be anywhere at any specific time. I remember being conscious of the fact that I was totally unreachable, kind of invisible in a way, unattainable to people that knew me and might want to be in touch with me. And honestly, for that time, it was very liberating. I felt very in the moment. And that's not to say that I couldn't also have that in my daily life here, but there is something about that type of removal and that isolation that taps into something that I don't want to not have in my life.
I think I definitely noticed that when I lived in Korea, and I loved it. I felt like I was living between two cultures because no one there expected me to follow their cultural rules. They were just like, oh, she's a foreigner, so you get a pass. You get a pass. And then I think for people pleasers who grew up kind of trying to appease other people, there's always that pressure in the States. But when you leave, you can honestly start making decisions for yourself based on what you really would like to do instead of what society says you should be doing. And it is very liberating. And I think I've turned travel into a large piece of my identity for that reason, is because it is so freeing and introspective and sparks curiosity and creativity. And so it's just, I can't say enough about it.
it's kind of cool to have a certain, I don't know if I say this right, anonymity
Yes.
to being in a place where you don't have any connections or ties, and you're not going to have people trying to reach you in any way. So it's just kind of, you're in complete control. You're 100% you, and you can just make all your own decisions and not have all of that, all of the pressures or all of the expectations that go along with day-to-day life, on a regular scale.
Tony does a lot of sex tourism.
Thailand has blocked him. God, I totally lost my train of thought. There's
Sorry, the way he started it, I just immediately went there.
Yes.
Was that all right?
Nobody knows where you are or what you're doing.
Yeah.
I guess it could.
Yeah, nobody knows.
Well, we'll put some videos in the show notes, but yeah.
There is something about, even if I wanted to, especially if I'm in a place that is really new to me or the culture is very, no pun intended, foreign to me, even if I wanted to somehow conform, I wouldn't know how. Even if I wanted to somehow fit in, I would have no idea how to do it. So I might as well just do just do what I want and assume it's not breaking the law.
Well, yeah. I mean,
like speeding in Italy or whatever.
Right. Or doing feet in Italy. Yeah.
That's an inside joke, which I'm realizing in real time isn't really great for a podcast. So we all, I think to some degree, might have mentioned places that are particularly special to us, but I'm wondering, are there any places that like you feel like you've really got some roots, or even if you don't, just holds a really special place in your heart that, you know, you always feel like you would go back and there would be a place for you there?
The island that we go to in the Philippines, that I feel when we go there, we actually do feel part of the community. We've been back there 5 times. We know we watched the kids grow up, the families that lived around us. So, I mean, it feels very much like a second home. I think that's probably one of the only ones I can think of where I feel like that's another like extension of community that we have.
Yeah. I mean, we were lucky when we visited Shannon because she had already such a great community around her there that we got to become a part of because we lived there for 3 months too.
Wait, what do you mean?
Korea?
Yeah.
Yeah, because she already had an established. So we like kind of just got to like.
We were like an extension of that, and we just kind of met Ray.
Yeah, I think the word is leech.
We stayed with a friend of Shannon's that we met the day we arrived there. We stayed with him for 3 months, Ray, who is, you know, was a great person to...
Wise.
Well, we haven't seen him, but I mean, we get occasional calls from him, but that was a great, I don't know, like an extended family. I feel like all of these people that we've met on our travels are like an extended family in a sense.
Well, and the cool thing too is like Jihoon, Ray's, I think it was Ray's friend that we all got to know. We got to have a traditional dinner with his family. And like, we were talking about the customs, you know, like how you should turn away when you drink in front of an elder, and we were all kind of laughing about all the things that we were doing wrong. We were asking, are we offending? But it was like a fun way to learn about some of the you know, rules of the culture.
Yeah. You're so old, Shawn, that we usually have to leave the room when we take a sip of our beer.
You'd never be able to drink otherwise. Shannon, what about you?
I would definitely say Korea. I lived there for 10 years, so it's definitely my second home. But with that being said, because I feel like I completely explored it when I was there, I'm not actually like racing to get back there. I do have friends there, but I've met up with some of those friends in other parts of the world. Like, I don't know, actually one of my Korean friends came out to the West Coast and we met up there. And so it's not, you know, it's like the people are going to stay with me regardless of where I am. The place is definitely special. I do want to go back at some point, but because we have a limited amount of vacation time, or most people do, I always choose to go somewhere new, or I typically choose to go somewhere new just to get that curiosity need met. That's actually back to the definition of what we think traveling is, right? For me, it's exploring new places, learning new cultures. And so going back to a place is kind of challenging for me.
What is one of the, I'm sorry, I'm taking over your podcast now, Shawn. What is one of the things from Korea that you would go back to specifically for, though? What is one of the things from there that you do miss?
Well, I would go back, I guess, in the future to see how much it has changed and to see, I mean, I lived in Seoul, which is a huge city, and even over the 10 years that I lived there, it changed so much. So I realized like that I'm missing so much by not being there. It's been 5 years since I've been there. I don't know. I guess I would go back maybe in another 5 years to like just see how things have changed and to go back to some of my favorite spots.
You make a really good distinction though, Shannon, because it's the same for me, is that I you know, the place that holds a special, you know, place in my heart and no surprise is New Zealand, right? And I've been there quite a few times. And you all know, like, we plan to retire there. You know, I've done the travel there. I know the country. So that, yeah, it wouldn't be a benefit for travel anymore, but it would be to live.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking too, we were just recently discussing how like finally we feel at home here in our new city. But before that, I think definitely Milwaukee, I felt part of the community there. But I think at that time, even though like south of Portland, Oregon was our home base, it didn't feel like home.
Yeah.
Like Sikihor is what felt like home to us, that little island in the Philippines.
And we'll just be honest. I mean, we had our little girl there, Roxy, our dog, which, we...
Oh, I was like, oh my God, you had a guy.
Yeah, it was like,
no, but I mean, I'm not going to lie. That was a serious draw. There was a dog that adopted us the very first time we went, and we went back there, and we were so excited to see her. Every day we spent with her when we were there.
Oh my God. To me, that's a reason not to go back.
Oh, but it was such a reason to be there. She was the absolute best. And obviously we met a lot of expats that are living there, people who are starting restaurants or accommodations, and, and just local people that, we spent time with, and we felt part of that, a part of that island. But yeah, Roxy kept us coming back there all the time. I mean, it was just part of why we went there. It really felt way more like home compared to anywhere else at that time.
And I've realized when we travel, like when people ask us about places, it's definitely for us the vibe.
Yeah.
And there are places we traveled where it doesn't feel as welcoming and friendly. And those are the places, even if they're gorgeous, we tend to like places that don't mind having tourists around, I guess.
We've been in places where it's been pouring rain, like downpour, and we didn't know where we were going. And we asked someone for help, and they walked us to where we were going. And they had no idea who we were, where we were from, or anything. But someone actually took the time to walk us to exactly where we needed to go. Didn't need to do that in the pouring rain. But that kind of kindness goes a long, long way. And being the Americans, the spoiled Americans, you really have to be humbled by that and the acceptance that people in other countries give you.
I think it makes you also want to be that person to help people here where English isn't their first language.
Yeah.
Or, like you've been that person now. So you definitely have a lot more empathy for like how it feels when you don't speak the language somewhere.
Yeah, you're lost and you don't speak the language and you're kind of just at the liberty, you need someone's help at that point. And, people were just willing to give it.
Yeah. And like I've had those experiences as well. And I think it's instructive in like my own probably empathy for folks, having been in places where I really did need someone to help me out. And I'm like, I don't want your money. I know I don't speak your language. I apologize for that, but like, I really need someone to help me out.
Yeah.
And so when the shoe's on the other foot, having had that experience, definitely being more empathetic.
Yeah. Well, and I guess like it's humbling. You can't have an ego and travel.
So we've all traveled quite a bit. Are there any places you have not been that people might be surprised to know you haven't been?
I think people are most surprised to hear that I haven't been to a lot of places in the U.S. So, for example, I've never been to Washington, D.C., our country's capital. And I think a lot, especially people who are not from the U.S. are surprised to hear that. But I guess people from here are surprised too. And it reminds me of when I was growing up, my grandparents had an RV and they would travel around the country and camp in certain places. And I started gaining some interest in traveling. And I asked, have you ever been anywhere outside of the US? And they were like, why would we go outside of the US? There are so many places in the US that we still haven't seen. And that kind of baffled me because for me, it was always about getting out of this country to explore other cultures, I guess. And for them, that just shows, like, I think their goal in traveling was to see the places, the physical places. Whereas for me, it's more than just seeing physical places that are beautiful. It's about, wow, they do things so differently here. And I want to I want to learn about that.
I've never been south of the equator. Like, we traveled for a whole year. We haven't crossed it.
Wait, isn't the Philippines south?
Mm-mm.
No, it's kind of on the border, but not
Just
Really?
above.
later.
Yeah.
People,
I think is it Malaysia or Indonesia where we would have, or both?
Huh.
So, but we haven't been to either of those countries. Yeah.
People are surprised I've never been to Italy because I have Italian heritage. My grandmother was Italian, and there's a lot of Italian relatives. But
We want to go.
yeah, we're gonna. It's on the calendar at some point. We'll get there, but people are usually surprised when I say I haven't been to Italy yet.
Wow, that actually surprises me, Tony. I thought definitely with your roots that you've been there.
I mean, I know we've been close. We could have stopped there, but I mean, when we did that year of travel, one of the things was let's go on a budget. So we didn't we didn't go to France and Spain and Italy and the places where we would have had to spend a little bit more. We went to places a little outside of that. We went to Budapest and Bratislava and different places where, we could stay and spend much less.
Right. I have never been to any place in Europe.
What?
Yeah.
That is shocking.
Well, I always thought like it's so developed that it's like I'll get to that when I'm older. Like I wanted to do more of the kind of things that would be more challenging.
You don't have many years left, Shawn.
I know. I was literally going to say that, but as we've established.
I don't know. I feel like Europe has a lot of challenging infrastructure. A lot of cobblestone streets,
a lot of steps,
a lot of stairs.
Oh, yeah.
It is harder for people, maybe who are a bit older and less fit. I don't know.
Well, I'm fucked, so I think I might cut that little last part.
But that's true, isn't
it? Yeah.
I don't know how to say it. It's true, right?
Is there any place that you would not travel to, and why not?
I can't really think of one that I would say, oh, no, I would never go there. I really don't think there is somewhere where I would just write off if I haven't been there. It's like, if I haven't experienced it, how can I say I would never want to go there? So I can't say there's somewhere that I would just never go to.
I don't know. I mean, I guess human rights violations.
Sure, like I don't want to North Korea, stuff like that. I don't know if that's necessarily somewhere where I would be like, oh yeah, if I have the opportunity, I'm going to jump on a plane and get there.
Yeah.
But there's nowhere that I would just write off having never been there, for sure.
Shannon?
I think if we're talking about histories of human rights violations, maybe the U.S. wouldn't be on my list.
Human rights violations, right on. Shit. True.
But I live here. So, yeah, I guess I would probably say, I don't know, there's no countries that are seriously off my list. I'd have to think about it. There are definitely like countries I traveled before others. Mm-hmm. I guess there's always just a list for me, like countries that I've wanted to go to. If I won a free trip somewhere, I wouldn't probably turn it down.
Free trip to North Korea.
Yeah. Well, actually, when I lived in South Korea, I had friends that did travel to North Korea, and it's very hard to travel there. You have to have a guide at all times, and they show you what they want you to see, but you pay a lot of money to do this tour. And I had, two friends that went, and they were glad to go and see it. But again, they're only seeing what the North Korean government want you to see. So of course I would consider my rights and the rights of the people that I'm visiting or of the country that I'm going to see.
That's the thing. I think there's a curiosity of anywhere you haven't been before. I don't know why you would just write something off.
Well, and even when we were all traveling in Myanmar together, were people saying that to us then? Because we felt like at that point it was a better time to travel there. like some of the human, although it's all a mess again.
We hit that window where...
But still, even then, we were hearing from people, well, yeah, but you're only seeing what the government wants you to see.
Right.
I mean, I'm with you in that there's no place that I would out of hand by virtue of just where it is or, culturally, I would say no to. But there are definitely places that I, I'm gay, and there are some places that they still behead gay people. So, I mean, I'm a little more reticent to maybe, I'd love to see Iran. I think they have a great relationship culture. I think they have great food. I am terrified that they would cut my head off.
The only, in that whole year of travel, the only place where Heidi and I had any sort of kind of bad vibe or bad experience was Vienna. And it was beautiful there. The architecture is beautiful. There's a lot of really, really cool stuff to see and do and experience. But we had kind of an unwelcoming feel in a couple places we had been. So not that I would never go back to Vienna for that reason, but, there's certain areas I have been where I don't, necessarily crave to go back to. But yeah, I don't think there's anywhere that I haven't been to that you would just say, no, I'm not going there.
I think it is different though. Like for you as a gay man, for Shannon and I as women, like Shannon, your experience traveling as two women in India, that's pretty intimidating. I don't know if I would want to tackle that on my own.
Yeah, we did that. I guess, we were younger, and I'm not sad that I went there. I learned a lot. So we were traveling there for 3 weeks. We actually had a 4-week journey planned, and we cut it short because it was very challenging to travel there, especially as two white women. We stuck out like sore thumbs, and we got scammed quite a bit. And so that was very challenging, but I wouldn't erase that trip because I did learn so much.
And I can see too, like as a couple, I would want to go someplace where I'm free to like love my spouse how I want to and not have to worry about it.
I'm really glad that I went to Russia when I did, like in 2015, because I actually think it's culturally fascinating. It's beautiful old buildings and very historical old buildings, beautiful countryside.
I think there's always something to take away from a country that maybe you didn't want to visit or isn't really well known. I think that my curiosity will always be satisfied if I go to a new place.
That's true of me too. And I try to take that prospectively now in my life, which is I have ended up in places either on, extended layovers or, I settled for something that wasn't really on my list because the place that I wanted to go was out of reach for one reason or another, and have always taken something positive away from that experience. I mean, that doesn't mean that something horrible couldn't happen. Right. But, my approach now is like nothing's really off the table for the most part because there's always something. It's just the perspective, I suppose, that you bring to it.
And I wouldn't say that I could overgeneralize. And if something bad did happen to me, I wouldn't be able to like blame the entire place. I don't think, right? I know people who've been to India and had completely different experiences than I did. And it was because of the people they were with or the different places they went, or maybe they were with a tour company. So you could go to, Hawaii, where a lot of people want to go and have a bad experience, right? And it has nothing to do with Hawaii. So, yeah. Yeah,
I was just thinking like the flip side is also true. Like you could go to your dream destination and have a horrible experience. So there's just so many factors. Yeah, that play.
I think our expectations play a big role in how we enjoy our travel, for sure.
So is there still a dream destination on your list for each of you? A place that like you haven't been to and you just really want to get to?
I would love to get to some new continents. So Africa and South America are high up there for me. I haven't been to either of them. I am very interested in a couple of countries in Africa because of safaris. So I would love to go on an African safari. Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, definitely on the list. And then Greece. I've not been to Greece, and there's just so much.
You've been to Turkey. You've been to Turkey, right?
I've been to Turkey.
Okay,
I've been to Croatia, the Balkan region, but not Greece. And so
I've been to Turkey. I've been to Turkey with Shannon.
We should all go to Greece. I would love to go back.
I know so many people have gone there and just love it so much. And so that's definitely on my list.
Obviously, I'd like to go to Sicily. I would love to go back to Asia and explore some of the other areas that we didn't get to on our world travel, but also even some of the areas that we've been, like when we went to Taiwan and Laos and stuff. I know that based on the food alone, I would want to go back there. But again, it was a very, very welcoming environment to be in. So those places I would definitely like to get to. But Sicily, for places that I haven't been to, just based on, family heritage and stuff, I wouldn't want to go there.
As you all were answering, I'm like, just one destination in the back of my mind. And then now I can't pick just one destination. So
no, it's too hard.
Then I can make it regional, I suppose. Like Eastern Europe, kind of those Slavic countries.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to go.
Istanbul and Budapest were two of my favorite places when we traveled. You could just walk around there for hours and see different stuff. I mean, it was a good walking city, in my opinion. There was just so much to see and so many different things to do, so many things to try. It was really one of the better parts of our world travel, I thought.
If someone asked you for just one piece of advice on their first international travel experience, what would you tell them or what would you offer?
I have a couple things. I would first say, look for where the locals are eating. Like, don't read the reviews in an area. Well, I mean, you can, but I would still always ask the local people. Or when you're wandering around and you see a big crowd of people outside a place, eat there, drink there, like go where the locals go. And my other thing that we learned, because as we did our Europe travels, we would have stuff like really scheduled out. I would recommend always leaving space for spontaneity and for like your itinerary to change, because sometimes like you'd want to stay in a place a little bit longer, but then you'd have your transport already booked, or like you'd meet somebody and get an incredible opportunity. So I just say leave space open to be spontaneous and to, like, if you're loving a place, stay a little longer. If you're not feeling it, move on. Yeah. Just stay open a little bit along your way.
Avoiding too much structure in your plan and allow things to happen organically, for sure.
I have actually helped some friends who are going on their first international trips. And one thing I want to say is I always recommend that they don't overplan. Mm-hmm. So I think it's tempting for people to try to fit in too much. So if they are flying into Paris, they want to see Paris, Rome, Berlin. I don't know. They try to plan like 9 cities in 9 days. And I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that. It's very tiring, not only jet lags, but also you want to give yourself time to not just see the big monuments, but to also like explore maybe life as a local a little bit and do a little relaxing and just immerse yourself in the experience. Leave some space in your days for unexpected things. I think that's always when the most fun is had.
Right. And that's, to me, where the magic happens versus when you're running from thing to thing and on a strict itinerary. Like, the magic happens when you're free to be open to a different experience. I
think, Shawn, you and I, when we were in Mexico, in Puerto Vallarta, we sort of wandered out of the Airbnb aimlessly on the last night, and we had a dinner plan. But then we just kind of walked around and we stumbled upon a really fun band. And that was one of my favorite nights of the trip. And it was not planned. And so I don't know. I just feel like there are a lot of bright spots in trips when you don't schedule yourself too much. Definitely just leave some time and space for wandering around and not having an agenda sometimes. Don't miss out on seeing something you really want to see that's on your list, but give yourself a little bit of space.
Don't overschedule, because even if you feel like you want to always be doing something, you will find something to do in the space you haven't scheduled. And also, whatever it is that you pack, cut it in half.
Oh, there you go.
You will not need as much as you think you're going to need.
Ever.
Like I literally whatever pair of shoes I'm wearing, that's it. And other places also have like secondhand and cheap stores. If you forget something, or if they're, like you're going to go hiking one day, but you don't have the right shirt, don't take up space for that one day. You can get a cheap shirt there,
Yeah.
So the size of your luggage will directly impact your planning once you're there, and probably to your detriment. The bigger it is, the less likely you are to just hop on a bus or, consider taking a short flight somewhere nearby.
That's great. Yes, I totally agree with you on that.
You have to plan the airport time around it. You have to plan the space for travel on it. You have to make sure you packed everything. It's just a nightmare.
I mean, I just got back from a 6-week vacation in Portugal, and I just brought a carry-on bag and a backpack. And people were like, how did you do that? But I was so grateful that I
was naked
that.
Most of it.
I was naked. I went to a nudist colony in Portugal. No, but I think just packing for 1 week and making sure that each item, so it's like a capsule wardrobe where every item matches everything else you brought, so that you can kind of mix and match. So it looks like you have new outfits on. And then if you have laundry accessible. So we stayed in Airbnbs, and so we were able to wash clothes. But I see people who are going for like less than a week, and they have this huge suitcase that they can barely maneuver themselves, and then all of this other stuff on top of it, and that just makes your life harder when you're traveling and you want to get around easily. It's just it adds a lot of stress, actually. And you can always buy things there if you forget something, right?
I mean, that's one of the things that I learned as well. I mean, that's so true. Is for the most part, obviously there are destinations or there's travel that you're going to do where you don't have things available to you. And, perhaps a safari is one of them, right? Or, going to far-flung corners of the planet, sure, where you're off the grid. But for the most part, the travel that you do, these places do have stores and amenities. So if you, get used clothes, or if you need toothpaste, you can probably get it where you are. So
like just about anything you said, bring the basics. You can get everything else you need just about anywhere.
And most likely cheaper, frankly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I've had that where the climate is it hits a bit different, because maybe you looked at the weather ahead of time and it was like, oh, okay, so I know what 60 degrees Fahrenheit feels like. And then there it feels different because of the humidity. So in New Zealand, for example, my friend and I had to go and buy like sets of long underwear because it was a lot colder than what we expected, just based on what we saw in the weather. So it's okay. If you have to do that, it's fine.
It is really hard to pack for New Zealand, because they can have very warm days and then very cool or wet days all in the space of, that can be one after the other.
4 seasons in a day. Yeah,
I think, for sure.
Like, Ireland is that way. Like there's a lot of countries like that. And you're just Portugal in the Azores, the islands. It was like that. It was like, I don't know, it's layers, scarves, and then, like a windbreaker, a rain jacket. So anyway, expect the unexpected.
However, if you're larger than the population, the general population, do pack those clothes.
Yeah, that's true.
I have worn crop tops that were not meant to be crop tops.
And you're not a sizable American either.
No, I'm very tiny. All right. What's something interesting you've been reading, watching, listening to, and or doing lately? And it doesn't have to be related to travel, but it can be.
Well, and not in the effort to plug something, but trying to get out of the business part of graphic design, I'm starting to go more into a fine art thing and actually creating things to do art prints and that sort of stuff, where I'm finding art festivals and stuff around the area where I'm actually going to start pushing my own fun, creative stuff that has nothing to do with a client or a business or anything. And honestly, it's all kind of stuff that somehow has been inspired through travel and everything that I've been exposed to traveling Asia and Eastern Europe and those sort of things. So that's just been a decision I made in the last 3-4 months that I want to do this, and I'm going to start doing it.
Are you posting any of that stuff somewhere? I'm sure all of you have seen this, and I know, you've mentioned this to me before, Tony, but I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah, not yet. I'm actually collecting. I'm supposed to do a show at the end of the month in July, and I'm collecting enough stuff that I want to post them right up to that point. Mm-hmm. So that's going to all happen right probably from the middle of July to the end of July.
Okay.
I feel like I've been kind of nerding out on plants a little bit lately and trying to learn more about native plants for helping pollinators. Real nerdy stuff.
And she's also involved in, you were involved in doing the trap and release.
Animal Rescue follows me everywhere. I don't have a choice.
Or do you follow it?
No, they find me. They find me every time. Even when I'm like actively trying not to get involved, it just can't happen.
Maybe you should put a cone on.
Seriously. Put blinders up when we were driving around the Philippines, like just don't look.
I just, after getting back, so in the summers I have time off from teaching, and I traveled, to 6 weeks to Europe, and then I came back and I do things around my house, right? So it's like settling back in, but then doing little projects around my house, whether it's something in the yard or painting the guest room, hanging photos and things or art that I bought overseas, because it does keep piling up. Because that's my favorite thing to get when I'm traveling is a piece of art from that place. Because every time I see it in my house, then it reminds me of my travels. But yeah, so I've been kind of puttering around the house and getting myself ready for the semester so that I don't have all these house projects to do when I'm teaching during the semester.
Okay, folks, thank you all for being here. I enjoyed it.
That was really fun. Thanks, Shawn.
Yeah, let's do this again sometime.
Thanks so much. This was really fun, actually, to think about this kind of stuff.
I want to thank you all for joining me on this journey, this first season of Deep Dive. I'm going to be taking the next month or so off and returning in October with a new season, new guests, new topics, new adventures. And in the meantime, I'll be releasing some greatest hits from the first season each week on Fridays, regular release time. So check back regularly on your favorite podcast streaming platform. And make sure to follow the podcast on Instagram at Deep Dive with Shawn, on Twitter at Deep Dive Shawn, and subscribe on YouTube at Deep Dive with Shawn C. Fettig to keep up to date with the latest news about episodes and the upcoming second season. You can also email me at deepdivewithshawn@gmail.com with any thoughts, comments, or questions. Thanks for sticking around for this first season, for listening, for engaging, and for sharing with your friends. More to come. As always, chat soon, folks.